If it's us, it's okay. Like right here.
There we go.
We're already friends. We have some friends.
I did.
I mean, I could.
I don't think so because it's two different phones. That would be really bad. Is it good? Just let it go. It's okay though. I'm seeing a black screen on my phone now. Oh, here it goes. It's loading in.
Oh, yes, I do that. I thought you meant like you had that mic. Testing.
So it's PAX.
I know, I noticed that too. It's like what's happening?
Woman in the audience, we're admiring your pink hair. Now everybody's gonna look at you.
Yeah, we're looking at
It's amazing pink hair. Admiring the pink hair.
and your choices.
So I guess it's about time for us
All
to
right.
get started.
I'll come in if I need you guys,
so
okay?
Thank you all so much for coming to our panel, Manners in the Metaverse. Thank you so much. To start off, before we introduce our panelists and kind of get into the thick of things, I just want to know, so how many in the audience have tried VR?
Oh, in the audience.
Awesome. So how many of you have tried a social VR experience?
I'm
So something to
trying.
share?
Hold on.
Nope, not us. Not us. No, the audience.
Okay, so kind of like 3/4, maybe a little over half. Good to know. Okay, they're associated with, because there are so many. It's a huge spectrum that's out there. So start at the end.
Oh, it's you. No, it's you.
It's me?
Yeah.
You're gonna learn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Cy Wise. I'm Owlmancer, studio director, and also science at Owlchemy Labs. We do Job Simulator and Rick and Morty VR. I'm also one of the co-organizers of VR Austin, which is one of the largest VR developer meetup groups in the United States. Well, I guess technically the second one is sort of a social VR, but in real life. But you'll notice that Rick and Morty and Job Simulator are not social VR experiences. My background is actually in sociology.
My name is Lisa Kotecki. I am head of community at AltspaceVR. And we have a VR audience. Wave to all the people inside AltspaceVR, sending you little hearts. My experience has been growing and cultivating the community the last 2 years inside AltspaceVR. And for those of you wondering, yes, we are back.
Woohoo! Yay!
We're back. Back from the grave. Cool.
Hi guys, my name is Eva Hoerth. I'm based here in Seattle. I do a lot of community building in VR in real life, but I'm also really fascinated about what we can do in social VR. And so sometimes I just go into social VR. All of these, I'm fangirling, by the way. Like, I'm surrounded by people I love. And so I just hang out in all y'all's worlds, and I just hang out in there, and I explore and I observe people because I'm really interested in sociology and ethnography in VR. So thanks for coming.
Hi everyone, I am Jazmin Cano, and I work at Fidelity. I do marketing and event coordinating there, but before my TLDR resume, I did 3D art for games, mobile games, and a lot of VR prototyping. So at Fidelity, I've been there for about almost 2 years, and I get to make these virtual worlds that people get to explore and hang out in with others, and it's so cool. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be your moderator for today. My name's Autumn Taylor. I also work at Owlchemy Labs. I am their knowledge owl, purveyor, and media master. So I handle marketing PR, and then also like crouching on that chair because I'm really short.
We can smooth.
So we kind of want to just jump into the conversation. So we kind of have everyone's background, and we know that the focus of kind of the challenges, a lot of it has to do with maybe harassment and things like that, and we'll get to that in the panel. But first, I kind of want to know, what are some of the overall challenges, overall, not necessarily within the community, but just in managing these giant platforms. What are some of the challenges you face building the platform itself and then the communities? Just kind of like dive into that.
I can go first. So Fidelity, I should explain what it is first. We're building an engine for multi-user collaboration. So anyone, whether you're an artist or a scripter or someone who doesn't have a background in that, can create a VR experience in real time with other people around the world. And so there are definitely challenges there because the engine it's open for everyone, it's open source. You have different types of people coming in, different communities that want to make their own experience. And so the biggest challenge that we have is kind of thinking about standards and setting up guidelines and code of conducts that cater to everyone, but not everyone agrees with each other. So some people might like open chaotic worlds where everyone can change anything and bring in any scripts or any models. And other people might like a more moderated, sometimes people call it policed environments where people tell you what not to do. And so because it's open to everyone, like I said, it's really hard to make it focus for one group of people. And so that's something that we're still learning about and how to help them create their own communities.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think one of the challenges is definitely you've got people coming in from all around the world with very different expectations and very different desires and with very different goals. So something that we've noticed is that, an interesting kind of brand of, I guess you call it harassment, but it's very unintentional, is a kind of mismatch of expectations around someone who's very playful and very boisterous and is there to kind of have kind of chaotic fun versus someone who's there to have a more structured experience and play the game according to the rules. And that can create quite a lot of friction. So yeah, creating environments that work for people who are coming in with a variety of intents and a variety of backgrounds is definitely a challenge.
This is sort of like an extension of all of these things, but one of the things I've seen them at the dinner table when we're having dinner with people, and now people kind of self-modulate and they sort of figure out how these technologies should be used with other humans, how to interact around people in VR, how to interact we don't think about as much in real life.
Totally. I think Jazmin kind of touched on that too with like establishing a code of conduct. Yep. That seems to be a pretty standard solution for a lot of these VR communities. So what does that entail when you're setting those kind of standards? Like what is within the code of conduct and how do you arrive at those conclusions that that's what should be included?
Well, ours is pretty much the basics. Don't be a jerk. It says specifics like no insulting others, no threatening, no harassment, and it's pretty much a long list of all the obvious things, like don't be a jerk, and at the bottom we have be excellent to each other. But one thing that I do want to point out, I manage a team of people who work in VR, so they're in VR for their shifts, and they talk to anyone who's coming in VR to help answer any questions or troubleshoot anything. And these people work in specific domains that I and my team run, and it's not necessarily all of high fidelity, and that's where the challenge comes in. We have a code of conduct, and like Cameron was saying, people have expectations. When someone leaves our world and they go to someone else's, they might have something different, like maybe it's okay to be a jerk because you think it's funny, and so people, when they experience that, it's hurtful. And so that's a lot of what we're learning now. And so actually, Cameron, I have a question that kind of ties into this. How do you learn about what people are doing in Rec Room? Like, how do you gather their info, what they think about that?
That's a good question. Well, first I just want to say I didn't realize that. I'm learning that high fidelity has be excellent to each other in your code of conduct, because that's our rule number one. That's your final list for various types of players. Like if people are coming and spending 5 minutes and then logging out, high touch relationship with our players. In forums, in the text-based forums like our Discord and on Reddit and things like that. So we'll talk to them pretty regularly and trying to keep our finger on the pulse. And we have a bunch of players who we kind of treat as our sort of trusted players that we use as a proxy for lots of other players. And so a combination of the kind of quantitative stuff from the analytics and the qualitative stuff from the community. We hope we have a fairly good idea of what's going on, but honestly, this is something we regard as like it's a big part of making Rec Room is the ongoing development of our moderation systems, so that we can always have a better idea of what's going on. And especially as the community grows, we've seen that the types of moderation systems and things need to grow along with the community. It's definitely not a one and done. Oh, set up a code of the moderation implications of it and how it's going to impact the community.
I would add there's another level of complexity to it, which is, the code of conduct, or what we refer to as our community standards, are just words on paper. And the moderator team and the internal team help bring life to those words, but then ultimately the users are going to come in, and as they start to feel safer, they're going to embrace them, and that's when truly it becomes a culture and a community that lives beyond us. is when they start to feel safe, when they feel like this is our world, these are actually things that we choose to embrace because it makes us feel good, and then they begin to indoctrinate and tell other new people that come in, this is how we are in this world, this is how things run. And that's truly what's going to help the longevity, because there's so many of us on this team, there's only so many resources for moderators, that it's going to really take our community holding these as their own and living them out.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So you're mentioning how that it's kind of like from the top down, like you have the expectations you set as a developer, and that trickles down to the community. What are some other ways that you've seen community members kind of tackle some of these issues? Because I know from a development standpoint, there's only so much we can do to combat harassment. So what are some ways that you've seen the community members kind of join in on this cause and help you all in that effort?
Well, some of it is that there's just a framework for their tools, right? So we have a space bubble. So if people get too close and you turn on your space bubble, people disappear and you essentially can't see them. We have a mute button, we have a block button, and I think part of one of the challenges of having those tools is, again, letting people know that they exist. You know, somebody comes into a world for the first time and they're looking around going, what are all these things and what do they mean? You know, sometimes they get a chance to go through what we refer to as a new user info or our campfire, and they meet somebody who says, here's how you use everything. Or if they come to an event and they haven't had a chance to go through that, I'm usually the person at the beginning of the event giving the spiel. If you've ever been to one of the events, you've probably heard me say the same spiel 100 times, because if one user doesn't get that info and they have a bad experience, they're never coming back. So it's really crucial to get that information into people's hands as quickly as possible. And it again just goes back, once they're armed with that education, once they have that baseline of here's what I can do to have a sense of agency over my environments, they can begin to support other users. Certain users take on just really being that person to keep the space safe and check in and how's everybody doing and monitoring the space and stepping in if they see somebody having an uncomfortable kind of scenario. The same way we would in real life if you're walking down the street. You know, some people might ignore there's this horrible interaction happening, but somebody's gonna step in and go like, whoa, 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 like what's happening here? Are you okay? Right. And so I think it's everybody coming together as humans connecting in this virtual world and being human and relying on their humanity to support each other.
Yeah, totally.
That's I'm glad that we're talking about this because, of course, as a sociologist, let's talk about your community itself. I actually see that Altspace is a really fantastic way of the community has sort of taken on sort of the culture that you guys have laid out, and they're kind of running it as well and like reinforcing that and sort of promoting that amongst themselves. So it's not just top down, like the developers telling you guys need to be nice, but there's also a lot of the community amongst itself sort of reinforcing that behavior just through normal behavioral norms. I was wondering, can I ask questions? Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Awesome, thanks. I was wondering if you had thought or have figured out like some ways to sort of encourage that amongst your players and your community to sort of take.
I probably wouldn't only be here. But I think it goes back to, you know, if somebody comes into an environment and they have a really great experience and they figured out here's why I have these really great experiences, they're going to then want to make sure that it stays great. So they're going to have a sense of agency to spread the word. Something that comes to mind that honestly just shocked probably the entire team is when we temporarily announced that we were going to shut down. Some people decided to flip some switches and make some users moderators without telling them. And what we found was they took over the space. They were meeting with each other, they were figuring out schedules so there was enough people covering. People can't put content that might be disturbing for somebody coming in the first time. And they got really creative on just really feeling like it's not our space, it's theirs.
To high fidelity, you're almost training them to become their own community moderators, yeah, because then they go onto their domains and they have their own spaces. So I'd be interested to hear how you handle some of that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. We're showing people the tools that they have to keep themselves safe and protected or comfortable, like depending on what their community our environment we're in, and then they're on their own. They have full control, and whether they agree with it or not, they have the option to say like what their rules are based on the tools that we're providing. And Lisa, your community member is amazing. That's so cool to hear. I think the community members are the absolute most important people. Like everyone in this room has the ability to change the direction of social VR right now. Something that I like to do if we have someone that has had like a not so pleasant experience or they have a great experience, I want to hear directly from them, like what's their gut reaction, like what do they need, like what's that extra thing that they wish they had, or what's something that could be changed. And this is what we do all the time. We're changing the tools and try to make it better for them. And so when people self-govern like that and then we hear back from them, that's how we get to keep making it better and better. And that's why I said like everyone here has that power. Everyone that goes in social VR is pretty much a pioneer in the direction of what the etiquette is and what the norms are and how to empower every single person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting note. I'd like to shift away from kind of like the idea of community moderation, and then on that note, this idea that the community members are the ones shaping the experience. What are some cool stories that you all have of your community members, or maybe your own experience that you had within your own platform of finding create their own?
Yeah, we could talk a little bit.
They can get married, sure.
Yeah, that's right. We just shipped the wedding feature in Retro. But yeah, we just shipped a feature that's our sandbox machine, which lets people kind of remix basically anything that we've put in the game. They can now dispense for themselves and kind of create their own games. And the reason we did that was because we saw the players doing it organically anyway. Like, you know, we have our paintball mode and our various modes, and they would go into paintball and they wouldn't start shooting each other. Instead, they would start playing hide and seek or murder mysteries and like just kind of reusing the space for their own games. And so yeah, we just kind of decided to turn that into real mode and kind of give them more support for doing exactly that. But every time we've given the community an inch of like more creative power, they've just blown us away with the like within like 12 hours of putting up the sandbox mode, they'd blown us away with the stuff they'd already created. So it's very inspiring to see what people do when you give them a little bit of space to run.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we talk about dance parties in VR?
Yeah.
I have some questions for Lisa here. So I don't know when this happened, but it was last year. I don't know if it was you or someone asked me to judge a dance party in Altspace. Yes, okay, so that happened. And for me, it's funny because, like, you know, everyone, you know, at one point we all dance in VR by ourselves and we don't really think about what we look like because you gotta test it out, you know? And so for me, that was a big thing, right? Because this stuff is so clunky, yet we're still trying to get back to that natural interaction that we have in real life. Like, sure, we might not look that cool dancing in VR because we might look like literal robots, but we still like made a dance party out of it. And I'll never forget like seeing this happen, and it just seemed like, okay, we can still do the stuff that we do in real life in VR, and I can be with anyone from across the world. So, do you want to like talk about that, or like, do you have any more dance parties coming up? Because I think that's amazing.
What specifically do you want me to say about dance parties?
Just like, how did that form? Did you plan it, or did people just start dancing?
So that was in partnership with Leap Motion, and they are a company that has hand sensors. So we thought it would be cool, since their focus is on hands, to have it specifically be a dance party where you have to do something with your hands. And I know not everybody knows what tutting is, but it's this sort of art form that does these really intricate hand movements. So that was kind of the foundation of like, you know, we probably want to do something along that line, like kind of like a hat tip to them. And so it just grew from there. And yeah, we had Nate, who does his weekly, or used to do his weekly DJ dance parties, Echo Space. And so he came in and said, let's get a live DJ. And it just started growing and growing and growing. But I think that we're taking something that is fundamental to human nature, which is movements, and then we're applying it into a virtual world. And ultimately, I don't think there is a difference between VR is there to help us, in my opinion, make us more connected. That sense of presence is what separates it from other virtual or social media platforms. You know, you're in a room together, and so we start to think about all the different things that we can do together. And that was a lot of our work for the first. God, even up until now, but our first year and a half, a lot of focus was on what can you do in VR, just throwing a whole bunch of things to the wall. The dance parties being one of them that got people really excited.
Right. I wonder, are there certain things that you're doing to like encourage and empower these like users to create these own experiences of their own? Like, obviously Rec Room created a mode so that it's to encourage players to create their own games within the game. And I know you've kind of encouraged like content creation through like Jim Jam's show and High Fidelity. Like, what are some of the things you're doing there to kind of encourage this creativity and like encouraging users to build their own experience within it?
Some of it is a lot of evangelism. There's some people in the audience that know that I talk to them a lot, just to see you know, what's really exciting them right now, and then how can they then expand upon that using the platform. A lot of my focus was on supporting content creators, creating events inside VR, or scouting out our developer community and seeing cool things they're doing. And then if they wanted to, some people just want to create for the sake of creating. If they wanted to, give them the opportunity then to get their creations in front of more eyeballs.
Yeah, same here. It's all about support. I know one of our users was working on an avatar, and so in case you don't know what an avatar is, it's your digital body. It's what you wear when you're in VR and how others see you. And in his own sandbox, he decided to just start hosting classes. So instead of like playing with stuff that we have and making art, instead he used the space to teach others and help them make their own. And so helping them, adding the event to our calendar, like specifics like that, and helping other users have their own events. That's a lot of my focus, as well as more specifically on the development side is getting feature requests, like hide and seek. Has anyone here played hide and seek in VR in any platform? Yes,
oh
yes,
my gosh.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
So my first hide and seek game, it was in this Burning Man-like environment I made, and people shrunk down, and they're just hiding behind things. But the weird thing is that when you get small, your IPD doesn't change. So in VR, it just seems like your head was lowered to the floor and everything's the same size, and it's super weird, but weird can be fun because it's all new. But specifically from that, we learned how exciting it is to really be able to get small and know that you can explore through little spaces and change the scale of things in VR that you can't do in real life. So we have a team that's been working on this specific feature request that is to change your IPD, and so I tried it last week and I just started screaming. I got small and I looked up and my friend was giant. I was like, dude, you're like as big as a building. And things like that, like seeing what people do with their own friends in the platform and then getting their requests and talking to developers about building what they want. That's the most exciting because we get fun stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. I know Cameron has a cool like hide and seek story. Like, wasn't there like in Rec Room, people were playing like sardines?
Yeah, that's
crazy.
That's kind of what I was alluding to with the sandbox thing. People would play this game called Sardines, which I wasn't familiar with. I think we didn't play this in Australia when I was growing up, but it's like hide and seek, where instead of saying I found you, you instead join them in the hiding place. And so we had some of our team play it with the community, and I just watched them for about 2 hours, just crouching in place, giggling, apparently doing nothing, but having a great time. But, yeah.
I love what I'm hearing. Like, all of these stories are fantastic stories about how the community has sort of made the space their own, and sort of either put their own games on it and their own spins, or again starting to build like their own culture within each of these experiences. And all of you seem to be doing your absolute best to sort of just reinforce this and give them the tools they need to do it. I think that's probably huge. That goes really far away in like letting the community sort of embrace that space as their space and sort of feel cohesively like a community.
Right, definitely. So that's like making sure that the community members, the users feel welcome. On that note, what all are you doing to ensure that your spaces are diverse and then friendly to people from diverse backgrounds, whether it be things like demographic differences, or even something like high fidelity, making sure that people who are maybe hardcore developers feel just as welcome as someone who is a complete VR newbie. Like, how are you ensuring that your spaces are diverse and that people can feel welcome and safe?
I can speak to this first.
Sure.
I think that your visual storytelling is foundational and crucial. So if your marketing does not have people of all different backgrounds, they will look at that picture and not see themselves. Essentially, people need to see themselves in it. If somebody does not want to gender identify and all there are gender identified avatars, they probably won't come in. So that's part of it. And then the second, I think, is setting an example. So if you would go in our calendar at any point in time, you would see somebody on our team decided to do an LGBT meetup. And then somebody else actually sitting in the audience decided to take it over. And now that's one of our biggest meetups. You know, I started something for International Women's Day, and then that gets, you know, female-driven content, and we scout out then developers of different backgrounds and highlight them in user stories. So I think, marketing is pretty crucial, and then when people actually get into the product, they need to be able to see themselves inside that product, so that they know that there's a spot and that they're welcome, and if they don't see themselves, they see enough different types of diversity to say, hey, maybe I can come in here too and be welcome.
Yeah, we also provide various avatars, whether it is gendered or if they're little skeletons like to fly around places, or robots, or just providing different options like that. But the other cool things that people can make their own and bring it in. So something that we didn't really think about or talk about was furry avatars, and in virtual worlds, the furry community is really large. And we started seeing people come in, and they're very talented artists making furry avatars, and they look awesome. So like letting them, helping them add that to our marketplace where people can see them and choose from them, that I think is what really helps, like keep adding them, keep supporting everyone from different backgrounds, even if it's not something we've talked about or anything that we relate to, like letting everyone come in and add to it. Like Lisa was saying, like really helping the developers get it in.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think a lot of what we're talking about now, we can look back at other examples of in real life, how do you make an inclusive community, or in previous online games and Second Life and all of those. So we have examples of how to achieve that. It's just a matter of how can we do that in VR, and maybe there's new ways to do that. So Sai, I'm curious, coming from a sociology background, do you have specific examples or stories from previous experiences?
So not from a sociology background, but I actually do from just a community running background, again, because I run VR Austin. And so this was an idea that I thiefed. I totally thiefed this idea. We actually put pictures during our VR, we do a VR Austin jam. It's like a 3-day jam that we do once a year for devs to come and just jam VR games and get wacky. And so what we do is all the organizers put pictures of our faces all over the place, specifically in bathrooms, but also all over the place with our names, and basically say, hey, I'd like to introduce us as your organizer staff. We're your organizer staff. If you have concerns, please come talk to us. We're here to talk to you. I actually noticed that this is something that both of your teams do. I've seen it in your team as well, where you walk in and sometimes there are just devs there introducing themselves as there and available, and they can be accessed, right? So the devs aren't just these like far away, distant people. Like you can actually access them, and that makes them feel safer. Like just having that presence and being able to like see and be able to interact makes them feel like, oh, okay, I'm in a good place because I've met these people and they're good and I believe that they'll help me. Another thing that I did, we talked about code of conduct a couple of times. I just want to drill into that a little bit. I jammed a code of conduct at the last VR Austin Jam, and I specifically wrote it in the most approachable language I possibly could.
It was so good. You should post it online.
An example?
Like in terms of approachable language.
Yeah. This is a 13+ panel. You can go out.
Is this a 13+ panel? Okay, so like one of the things that I wrote is specifically so sexual harassment and harassment. Basically, I said specifically, hey, this is VR Austin Jam. We're here to be professionals, so be professional, fam. This is not your dating service. This is not your D&D group. You know, you need to act in a professional manner. Another thing that I wrote somewhere was, if you are thinking whether or not the thing you're gonna say is appropriate, just don't say it. Just don't. If you're wondering, like, no, it's not. If you have to wonder, then it's probably not okay. And again, I tried to give like tangible examples and be very personal about it and write it in very approachable language, specifically so that I wanted people to laugh with me. And I wanted people to look at it and identify and like maybe get a tasteful chuckle or maybe appreciate it or be entertained. But I wanted them to internalize it. The approachable language puts people in the defense a little bit less. It's a little bit welcoming language to like invite you to come and absorb this code of conduct for yourself because it's cool. And I used a lot of language also sort of talking about us as a group and what we want and how this is our group and how we want this. And again, all of this is very inclusive language. So it's sort of ways that I've been using to sort of just reinforce like that community sort of feeling in real life. Yeah, and there's some of this in VR. Like again, like I said, like I know you guys have your code of conduct. I actually love how a lot of your stuff is like in your dorm room, and it's like little stuff that you can pick up and like interact with. Like it feels very virtual. But then again, you get into these social VR spaces, and when you guys are there, I'm like, ah, hello people who I know, and I feel comfy.
That's actually one one handy thing that we did was try and make the code of conduct very visible and pick-upable and shareable in the experience, because it gives the users language to talk to each other. They can kind of go, hey, this is not cool. See, it says right here, and they can show it to each other. Like, hey, rule number 3.
Something you can point to, literally point to.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you gonna say something, Jazmin?
Yes. Sorry, what was the last thing you said? I just blanked.
Oh, just kind of like setting the tone with the code of conduct, being very approachable, and having like that accessible language.
Well, because it's our code of conduct. Oh, sorry, I just jumped in my bed.
Oh no, it's fine.
I'm brain farting.
That's okay. But before we move on to questions, I kind of just want to close on like our panel questions, just kind of asking you all, what do you see as the future of social VR looking like? What are your hopes, your dreams? What are some maybe use cases that you all see kind of emerging? I know it's only been like a year of like the consumer VR hardware has been out, but kind of where do you see things headed?
Sophia Dominguez recently tweeted, she is the founder of SVRF or something like that. I don't know. Sophia Dominguez, you can find her on Twitter. I think her handle is Sophia EDM. But she said something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and going into a social VR world where you don't know what to expect and knowing that you will be immersed with strangers gives a lot of people anxiety. Like, people are nervous, and sometimes it doesn't seem welcoming, even if there are teams that are making sure everyone feels welcome. It's just so new, and she said she sees it as Reddit in the future. And that's exactly what I've been thinking. Like, there are different communities, different people with like interests. I don't know, there could be like a Lady Gaga social VR room where you know you're gonna go and talk to fans. Or what about fishing? And you know you're gonna go talk to people who know about fishing, and you can share your fishing stories with. And so social VR, I see it as something that's open for everyone. Like, I know my mom can go in and like talk about farming, or my cousins who are not like into tech can go and talk about 49ers or something. So really like making sure everyone has the ability to make these, but give them the power to create the spaces so that everyone's comfortable. And like whether it's teachers or therapists or people who want to have dance parties. Stretchies.
Stretchies.
Yeah.
Stretchies is the unofficial yoga we do at Owlchemy, so that like nobody knows they're doing yoga.
Because everyone can stretch.
Yeah, just giving everyone that power to make what it is that they want to do in VR that they can't necessarily do in person, whether it's like location-based or financially or anything else. Just everything in VR. I want to live in VR. That's what I'm saying.
Can I live with you in VR?
Yeah.
Please, we can make the coolest little room.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yes. I just want to say that I want to have a really optimistic view of social VR. So I see it, changing who we are in real life, because it's been proven in many cases that VR does change our behaviors in real life as well. So if we can make it awesome, meaning all of you, if you go into social VR, you're going to be awesome, right? You're going to be the nice ones. You're going to be telling people to be good people. And if we can build up that positivity and design our spaces, all of your spaces, to enforce that and to make that the norm, then I see that translating to the real world. And I think that the real world needs a lot more nice things, nice people. So if we can just make this just a nice place and put it all out in the real world, I see that. So I'm envisioning like not just you're in VR, you're isolated, but I see it all coming back to where we are right now. So I have high hopes, and I'm really happy that all of you are working on these things, because that makes me feel better.
I see us just barely scratching the surface for social VR. I think that each use case that we've seen in AltspaceVR is going to be its own company or app. There will be dating apps for VR. There will be apps for you can get married. There will be apps for people with PTSD. There will be apps for therapists who want to help their clients with social anxieties. There will be dance party apps, which I think I just saw Kent By dancing. I don't know if it was a social one or not. He has amazing moves. So we already know that dancing, there's gonna be a lot of dancing in VR.
Killer
So
app.
I think right now we're seeing like this macro community, because the community is still growing and it's small, and as the technology evolves and it becomes easier and easier to put on a standalone headset, and we can start giving it to more people without them having to have some special technical degree and go on forums for 20 hours every time something breaks down. We're going to see more and more people using it, and in that we're going to start to see micro communities of interest based, and then we will have the Lady Gaga room and the Pink Tutu room. That will be my room. So that's what I see. It's definitely going places, and we're just at the very beginning.
I literally don't disagree with anything that was said. So basically, coming from an MMO background, everyone wanted to be the one MMO to rule them all, because then you have the most people in that one MMO, and your population's huge, and it feels really like a big populated world. And because there were so many MMOs, and the MMO industry was like so fractured, like no one got to be the one MMO to rule them all until World of Warcraft, then World of Warcraft, and still World of Warcraft. I feel like actually social VR is exactly the opposite, actually. Right now we're in a little bit of a state of, there aren't a ton of social VR apps. There are more and more coming out, but there aren't a ton. So you get into this space where, because everyone's going to these few social VR apps, you're kind of in the worst part of like a party when you're uninvited, but you don't know anybody else who's there, and you're kind of standing around, and you're trying to figure out who these other people are, and maybe we have something in common, but I'm not sure why they're here, and then like trying to overcome that. I agree that apps are going to become much more specialized, more niche in some ways. Like people will go to apps to sort of be a part of the community they want to be, kind of like PAX. Like there are a ton of people here at PAX, but like the logo, like the slogan for PAX is "Welcome Home," right? Like you come in and you're like, here are all these people, and we all have like sort of shared experiences, or like we love to fan out, and we love our games, and we love being nerds, and we love nerd culture, and so we have something in common, so we can sit in line before a panel and like all chat. And that's kind of what social VR is going to be. A lot of people are going to come together for specific reason and know that they already have something in common and sort of know and identify with that culture. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be pretty rad. PAX all the time, 100% PAX. Never any PAX.
PAX and VR. We can open up the floor for some questions if anyone wants to line up with the microphone, and I'll relocate so I can see people.
Should I just go?
Yeah, go ahead, your friend.
Do you think that as VR technology becomes more widely available to the public, that this will at all open the floodgates of social interactions, like in a very negative way? Like I played, I just got Star Trek Bridge Crew recently,
Yeah.
and that's like the single most polite and friendly online multiplayer game I've ever played, because the barrier to entry to play is so high that everyone there wants to be there. Everyone wants to be Kirk and fly the ship. No one's dicking around, and if VR headsets were $20, I can't believe it would be that way.
I have feelings about this. Sorry, I'm going to jump in. I have feelings. Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a thing, which I think is why it's so important, why we have these panels and these discussions, and we're trying to set culture now. I think if we can do our part to sort of set expectations about what experiences in VR should be like. I mean, look, we hang around a lot of human beings on the planet all the time, and nobody's like, assaulting each other. Like, we're able to conduct ourselves, as rational, polite human beings. We're going to have the ability to do that in VR, but we have to set those standards now while it's still small. So as more people start gaining access to it, there's already that base level of assumptions of like, this is how you act.
Okay, thanks.
Can I touch on that a bit?
Yeah.
And also, I do think it might get worse. At least it'll be more noticeable with so many people. But if we all build the tools and help request what we think would work, that'll help a lot. Like Overwatch, for example, I hate going into team chat when I'm playing with strangers because they're always so rude. Like they'll hear my voice and just attack me. But I can mute them, and then I can just talk to the nice people, and then it's awesome. So as long as those tools are in place, if everyone has a VR headset, we could ignore those jerks with the headsets.
Also true. VR can make you a superhero with superpowers.
Last thing I'll add also is I think there's also going to be use cases for people who just are connecting with people they already know. That was definitely the premise of our app. We, as a communications platform, we hypothesize people, in real life, you connect with people that you know, in addition to people with common interests. So I think in that case, it'll be inconsequential if that stuff is happening. Not to say that we do need to focus on it now. It will get worse, etc. But there will be certain parts of the population using it just to hang out with each other because they have time and distance issues.
Hi. I'm working with a VR startup that's also like looking at social VR, and one of the things I'd really like to know is sort of from a design perspective, how can we avoid our users having negative experiences to begin with? Because when talking about things like the community and the code of conduct, obviously, if you have a bad experience, yes, you can mute someone or report them, but you still already had the bad experience, which may or may not ruin your day. And I'm wondering, in terms of like game design or just sort of larger design, what can be done to maybe like make it so that you don't have that negative experience to begin with?
I can talk a little bit about that one. So I think one thing I've seen in a bunch of apps, including ours, is I think, I know we went through a bunch of evolutions of different kinds of more reactive ways to react to people who are creating an unpleasant environment. And I think increasingly this kind of passive ignore bubble seems to be a standard that's emerging in social VR, which I think is very powerful. And that handles the kind of physical side of harassment, because that's kind of what's unique about VR is as well as the kind of verbal harassment, you can also experience a very kind of strangely real feeling physical harassment because of the sense of presence, exactly. And so making a passive kind of ignore bubble where things either disappear or fade out as they get close allows you to kind of set your own personal space boundary and retain that kind of physical autonomy. For the verbal stuff, I think that's probably down to the specifics of your app. Like in Rec Room, we choose to start with the mics live and try and make it fairly easy and rapid to kind of be like, oh, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm just going to opt out of this. Depending on what your app is, you might be able to start with opt-in voice chat. So if you had the personal bubble and an opt-in voice chat, I think you could probably have a reasonably good chance of not being exposed to anything you don't want to until you're ready.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I totally agree, by the way. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of different forms of both verbal and physical.
We have seen some different forms of
new
various
forms
things.
Emerging, yes. Yes, I would say, I'm not going to list off specific examples for the sake of time, but I think as a designer, your goal, or at least hopefully most of our goals, would be to take off as much work as possible for the person being harassed, because a lot of times the tools that we are used to require you to do all the work, like, okay, now I have to go in and I have to mute them, I have to block them. But think about ways you can design, because you have like an undefined palette, right? How can we design the world to even prevent harassment in the first place? That's what I like to think about more, instead of a bunch of reactionary tools, which are needed as well. But if we can think about, for example, Google is doing a ton of cool, they do so many prototypes per week, it's crazy. But they have one specific example where there's two avatars playing poker. I don't know if you guys have seen the dog poker example. That's one of my favorites. So there's, okay, it sounds weird, dogs and poker, but anyway. So there's two avatars and you're represented as dog heads and you're playing poker, and one, in the example that they show, someone wins and then the other person looks mad. They're like throwing the cards down and it looks like they're about to get up and then walk around the table and go like physically, as a dog. This is all as a dog, because that's, VR is weird, guys. So they show that happening, but as soon as the one that's angry dog, gets up, they actually have their world turned to black and white, and everything focuses on their chair. So it's telling you, go back to.
With dealing with that, and if you thought there were particular tools or particular intricacies for dealing with it in VR.
Doing record people, I can just put in a little bit of work to host the event myself, and then I'm kind of in control of that surroundings. Versus if I just want to dive into the public pool and see what happens, I always
they want except for kick each other, and I've seen them respect each other so much that even though like you'll see someone with a penis, like a 3D model penis, like you have those people teaching them how to make the texture better, like. And I know like that's not what high fidelity is like showing. Like, yes, you can do that, but like I said, we want people to do what makes them happy and what will help them build their business or do what they want. And so that's an interesting example where people are like, well, you know what? I don't care about being nice. I just want to go like do crazy stuff with people who want to do crazy things. And I've seen a lot of really interesting, fun stuff happen. They're just going like, whoa, I'm really glad I don't have to moderate this.
That's crazy. See, for a second there, I thought that story was going in like a purge direction, but no, it's very polite, consent-based 3D models of penises.
Yeah, I like that. Well, that's something that I really like. I've heard a lot of you guys say this, and it sort of all comes down to the fact that like you're both in harassment and in terms of like, you know, factionality and letting people sort of customize their own experience, which is really interesting. Like VR gives you that ability to sort of like, oh, I'm a player and this is sort of what I want for my experience. I don't want people to come any closer to me than this amount of feet, or, you know, I want to be in this kind of world with this sort of, you know, set of expectations. And it's really interesting that VR sort of gives you the ability to let everybody sort of customize what's the experience I'd like to talk, and you can create that experience, which is, I don't know, something VR allows you to do.
Thank you very much. Hi.
So back in April, I brainstormed ideas for how to make social VR. Our topic was how to make social VR welcoming, and how to design for that. Pretty designers to come up with ideas, and one of the ones that has stuck with me is this notion of cultural onboarding. So oftentimes when you go into like any of these VR worlds, you'll get some kind of tutorial like this is how you click the thing, and then this is how you change your avatar and all of that. But sometimes they don't. I feel like there's an opportunity to go beyond that and to from the beginning be like, this is the space that you're entering. This is the community that's here, and this is what's okay and what's not. And they even developed it to be more like you get to almost feel what it's like to be up in someone's space, so you actually know that that feels uncomfortable to be like this. And so they designed it, but in a safe way, not to freak someone out right away. But it was all like, hey, just so you know, this is not okay. Because a lot of times people come in and yeah, they don't know what to expect, like you were saying. So just kind of pointing things out early on, like as soon as they first download the app and install it, you know, won't guarantee, but it will help. So that's,
try.
Yeah, you can try. So that's just one cool example that we came up with.
Yeah, I think everyone should do that before trying any VR thing. There should be like a how to be a person in VR
Yeah.
thing. So like, the thing that I hate the most is when someone who's totally new goes and pokes someone's eyes, like because they've never had their own virtual eyes poked, and I'm like, can you please do it to yourself? Like, it's so uncomfortable. And so as soon as like they say like, okay, yeah, poke my eyes, haha, I'll like go and do it, or like someone else will do it, and they're like, oh, that's weird, and then they stop. So if there was an app that's just like, don't do these things, or just
like a packet app.
that is awesome.
How to VR. Typing. I think what's happened in a lot of social VR apps is we are now just starting to experiment with other ways of managing their community that maybe work better specifically in VR. I've heard people talking recently about things like persistent reputation systems and things like that, so that like, you know, people who, where you find people who are consistently being assholes have an asshole tag that, I don't know, maybe it's just the image of things like this maker, what did you call it, Makeathon? Makeathon, yes. And like jams and whatnot, people who are experimenting, like what are tools that we can give people that encourage lack of assholery?
That's a great term.
Thank you. We have time for one last question.
Good. Hi. Thank you all for coming out. I'm a big fan of Job Simulator, and it's really cool to see that Altspace is back. I actually had a somewhat similar question to yours, but from a different angle. So VR is new, but MMOs and social online spaces have existed for a long time. And one of the questions that has come up is, what is the responsibility of the developer when something bad happens? You know, in situations where the promise of a free and open community is not enough, what do you do? Do you permaban people? Do you shut down whole communities? Do you nuclear reputation score? What do you feel is your responsibility in situations like that?
How do you feel?
Yes.
How y'all feeling?
It's a great question, and yeah, I mean, I think it is the responsibility of the developer of the community to set and enforce the tone. We certainly try and do it. Like we'll ban people who don't follow our code of conduct. That's why we have a code of conduct. You know, if we weren't going to enforce it, we weren't going to ban people, we wouldn't have it. And I'm the first to admit we don't do it perfectly, and probably never will. You know, we have one of our catchphrases at the office is "humans gonna human." You know, no matter how much you try and do, we always just, you know, people are going to be humans. But yeah, to the best of our ability, we do feel a responsibility, and you know, if we're gonna, I think it's a lot like if you're going to host PAX and you're going to bring a bunch of people here, you know, you do have a responsibility to make sure everyone's kind of safe and has a good time, and I think that translates to social VR as well.
I would agree. There's definitely a level of complexity in it, and that there's just not enough people and enough hours in the day to watch what's happening all the time. So it's this dynamic interplay between we create community standards, we create consequences for not following them, and then ultimately the community also then needs to take some ownership of it so that they can support each other. Because like Eva mentioned, unfortunately the onus goes on the person receiving this unwanted behavior, and then that's hard because then sometimes we don't even hear about it. So we have to encourage them and give them resources, because at this point that's all we have is that feedback loop. But it's constantly top of mind. It's nothing that ever goes away. Like, now that we build these tools, we can just put this away and we're done. It's really a dynamic interplay to continue to keep the environment safe, and it's absolutely our responsibility to set the standards that then can go ripple throughout the community. And like Cameron said, we're constantly learning. We're far from perfect in terms of tackling it, but something else I would also add is that we had a lot of diversity in tackling the problems. We had a lot of different types of background with age and ethnicity and color, and all different types of the spectrum looking at this issue so that we could get people impacted by the issue solving the problem, in addition to people not that impacted by the issue will also have a different perspective.
I want a humans gonna human t-shirt.
The second person who said that to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you all again for coming out, and a huge thank you to our wonderful panelists.
Can we give a thank you to our amazing moderator, Autumn?
I'd also like to thank our lovely enforcers. Thanks for keeping panels running. You make PAX happen.
And thank you all of you for coming here.
Everyone's very
You guys
active.
care. That's awesome.
Yeah, everyone's very active on Twitter, and this conversation is an ongoing one, so feel free to join in it with us. We'd love to hear all of your thoughts, and then have a happy PAX.
Yeah, at us, please, with your questions. We're always talking.
I don't think everybody in VR.
Yes. If you do have any questions, I think some of us are free to hang out outside if you do want to chat a bit more, since our time's up.
Outside? Well, not like outside, just outside on the side. I'm leaving. I'm gonna go get some froyo.
Alright guys, thanks for watching. That is the end of the panel. Hope everybody had a great time. It will be on my YouTube channel, so if you missed it, or if you have someone that wants to see it, go ahead and I will share that information when I pop inside. Thanks guys. Happy